While other leaders were condemning Palestinian terrorists, Yara Sachs held their hands for selfies. She called Israel racist, then backed millions to UNRWA, Hamas's front. She stood by the liberals, ready to arrest Netanyahu. She is Trudeau's kind of Jew.
Good day, I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. Today is April 9th, 2025. I'm joined, as usual, by my regular co-hosts, Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford.
That would be me. Good to be here.
And Western Standard senior Alberta columnist, Cory Morgan.
Perched on the end as always.
Indeed. We're going to be talking about how the ideas of Alberta or Western independence, possible stateship, have crept into the federal election. What impact is it having here at home in the West, and what impact is it having out east, if any? Next one's a sensitive topic. Does crowd size matter? The polls are showing most polls at least, are showing the Liberals with a lead, some a big lead, some a small lead, some the Conservatives tied. But Pierre Poilievre is routinely receiving huge crowds at his rallies, while Mark Carney, with a few exceptions, struggles to fill a pub. How could one be in the lead and not really be attracting much of a crowd, and the other one be behind and filling aircraft hangars? We're going to talk about it. And the Notwithstanding clause has made its perennial appearance in this election campaign. Pierre Poilievre saying he is willing to use it if necessary, to impose mandatory minimum sentences for repeat offenders, something that the Supreme Court has said in the past it does not like. The leader of the Bloc Québécois says that would be right-wing extreme totalitarianism or something like that. The translation from French was a little tough. But he thinks it's a good idea to use the Notwithstanding clause to effectively ban English in Quebec and make sure it is the proper French ethno-state that the Bloc Québécois hopes it can and should be. Before we get into it, important announcement. We, last week, started getting some donations from people, unsolicited, saying that they would donate to us $1,000 each if we would take the paywall down and make the Western Standard free for the rest of the election campaign so that voters everywhere could read it without hitting that pesky paywall. It blew us away, and we put out a call to Western Standard members. We put out a couple of emails saying, hey, if we can raise enough money, we will take down the paywall, make it free for everyone for this election campaign. And people came through in huge numbers. As a result, we have taken the paywall down, and it is free for absolutely everyone to read right now. So make sure you're sending articles, sharing those articles around your friends, family, colleagues, and sworn enemies even, to make sure they're reading it and getting the full benefit of having the paywall down during the election. Before we get into the show, though, I have to thank our sponsor. This episode of The Pipeline is sponsored by New World Precious Metals, based right here in Alberta. Years of inflationary money printing and a rising debt have decimated the average Canadian savings. Gold and silver are the only currencies that have held their value for thousands of years. Last year saw 30% gains. New World Precious Metals offers unique platforms to help protect and grow your hard-earned wealth with silver and gold. Check them out at newworldpm.com. Okay. I'm not that upset that talk of Western or Alberta or Saskatchewan independence has entered the mainstream media conversation. I tried pretty hard to get the attention of the media. They're all based in Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa triangle for a Western issue, and well, it's in. This all falls in the context of 51st state talk with Donald Trump, But Danielle Smith has warned that if the next federal government, presumably liberal in the case she's talking about, doesn't take some pretty major action to rectify some of Alberta and the West's major grievances with the federal government and Confederation, that it will spark a national unity crisis. She has, when asked about referendums on independence, she has said, well, I'm not going to call it myself, but hey, Albertans, through initiative legislation, have the right to start a referendum themselves, and they can make about whatever they want, hint, hint. And then Preston Manning he wrote a piece in the Globe and Mail stating that if the Liberals win, if a vote for Mark Carney is a vote to break up Confederation, very plainly stating that if Mark Carney wins, the Liberals get a fourth term here, then it is very possible, and I don't think I'm interpreting him wrong, saying potentially desirable for the West to stake out on its own and chart its own future independently of Ottawa. Cory, what impact has this had on the federal election?
Well, I don't know if it will have an impact on the federal election, but it's brought it into stark relief. If anybody's looking at the polls across the country, if they're to be believed, we've got a red wave of liberal support across this country and a great big blue chunk right in the middle. Like, it's highlighted that difference of opinion that the West holds on federal politics with the rest of the country quite clearly. So, a lot of independence-minded Westerners I've talked to in the past, they talk about, the East hates us and so on. No, it's even worse than that. The East doesn't even think about you. They're indifferent to you. That's what the reality tends to be. And hopefully, at least with that polling, they will realize we're here. And the West is not impressed with this. But whether it impacts the election is another question. If I lived in a different region, I'm trying to put myself in an Easterner's shoes, which is difficult for me. I have a province coming out and saying, you guys had better vote this way or I'm going to do that. Well, I know what my kind of nature is. It's like, kiss my butt. You don't tell me how to vote. I'll vote how I please. This election is really going to impact the support for Western independence without doubt. But whether or not the Western independence movement impacts this election, I don't think it's going to register.
Well, it is, Nigel, getting at least some attention. I don't know if it'll impact the election or not, but it's certainly getting attention in the commentariat. Smith's statements, Preston Manning's opinion column in the Globe and Mail. At a minimum, I think the person who is unhappiest about this most is Pierre Poilievre. There's a lot of people in the East who, for some reason or another, they're like, I don't like the Conservative Party is Western-based. The Westerners really like them. They're going to have to try really hard to get our votes out here in the East. Why would Smith and Manning raise this during an election at a time that Pierre Poilievre's probably not too pleased about?
Can't speak for either of them as to why they would do what they would do, but certainly from Pierre's point of view, it's not helpful. But I don't think it required the intervention of either Premier Smith or of Preston Manning for this to be an issue. You just know, because of the value difference that there is in the West and in the East, that another disappointment in the West is going to be bad for Confederation. Go back 40 years and look at what Manning was talking about in this article. And he said, look, we had the same thing in the 1980s, disappointment in the West. Well, we launched a campaign, The West Wants In, and we sort of got the door open enough that we could have nearly 10 years of Stephen Harper government. That was the West getting in with the assistance of much of the rest of the country. But you can only do that once in a lifetime. And that's not going to happen again. So if one part of the country, whether it's Western Canada or whether it's Quebec, is consistently denied the respect of the rest of the country, they are going to get restless. And it didn't take Premier Smith to point that out. We were saying it, or I was saying it, however you want to put it. But, it's not like this comes out of nowhere. The only thing I just refer you to is what Mr. Harper said on as he introduced Pierre Poilievre in that massive rally in Edmonton, and he said that the last 9 years show the inadequacies of all the problems that Canada have. Maybe you want to blame Trump, but the problems actually come from 9 years of Liberal policies that have not done well. Those policies have been at the expense of the West for the most part, especially the energy ones. So again, if you have one part of the country slamming the door in the face of another part, it's a problem. It doesn't bring you to say so.
Pardon me.
Mm-hmm.
Cory, Quebec, Ontario it's the one part of the country more than any other that does not see itself with any regional identity. It's not Ontario; it's Upper Canada. I've said before, if you drive around Ontario, even in rural Ontario, you will never see a single Ontario flag on private property. It's on the courthouse, it's on the town hall, and the municipal buildings, provincial buildings. It's there as an official flag. But most Ontarians couldn't tell the difference between that and the red ensign. There is no such thing as Ontario. There is Upper Canada. There is such a thing as Quebec. It's not Lower Canada. But Ontario has, at times, when national unity has been threatened by Quebec, voted for the federal party most seen, at least, as best able to keep Quebec in the fold, make Quebec feel a part of Canada. If you're being less charitable, more to my view, appease Quebec and give it what it wants. Ontario was often voted that way. But I don't think ever, and including now, there is a large group of Ontarians who see a threat to national unity coming from the West, discontent in the West. I don't know, maybe you disagree with the premise of what I'm saying, but if not, why would Ontario not follow that traditional pattern that it's had in the past of voting for the party, Liberals, most able to keep Quebec happy when Quebec is upset? Why would they not repeat that with the Conservatives with the West?
Yeah, well, again, it shows that indifference I was sort of speaking of. They don't even realize, I think, how upset we are out here. They don't think the threat is real coming from the West, and they better understand. When we're polling now, over 30% of people considering leaving a country, and I'm seeing dismissive attitudes on social media from people out there already. Well, 2/3 of the province doesn't want to leave. Boy, an independence movement consistently hitting at 30%, and this is before this election is over. That is significant. You better bloody take it seriously. If those numbers, right now, Quebec, they're sitting around there, but not, they come and go a bit. Again, it shows how explosive things can turn out here because, yes, Quebec gets pandered to. Quebec gets attention. Quebec gets asked to stay. They asked, what must we do to make you feel happy with the Federation? When we show 30%, they say you're selfish, you're bitter, you're rednecks. We get an aggressive response coming back to us in the West. And that, of course, will only inflame it further. But again, I don't think it's a wish on the part of Ontario to want to see secessionist movements grow in the West. They just don't take the West seriously. And that's part of what's built it for a long time, whether it comes to attacks on our resources or other such things. And the West thought they were going to get a break. They thought they were going to get another Stephen Harper, even if only for one term. We've had 9 years of horrific government at our expense. We thought, okay, there's the turnover. There's the flush of the toilet. We can get some change for a little while. And it turns out at the first opportunity, Central Canada said, nope, you know what? We're going to give you maybe another 10 years of Liberals. I don't think they have any clue of what's bubbling up out here.
Yeah. And, it's not like Poilievre is campaigning on a hard West wants in program. Stephen Harper did not fix equalization from Alberta, Saskatchewan's perspective. Pierre Poilievre has said he will not touch equalization. It's a sacred cow for Quebec and the Atlantic provinces. So it's not like there's no talk of changing the Senate in the Conservative.
We're just hoping for government to be less bad.
Screw the West less than is the status quo. It's not like this is going to be a raw Western government. It was just screw the West less. Nigel, Andrew Coyne wrote a rebuttal of Preston Manning's piece in the Globe and Mail. He's also a Globe and Mail columnist, so in the same pages. Saying that, Preston Manning and the Western secessionists and whatnot, they're sore losers, that they're they're willing to leave if they're not getting their way. I mean, sure. But that's also been Quebec's attitude. That the English side of the Laurentian commentariat seem to have no problem that if Quebec is shut out of power permanently, well, then they at least have a bone to pick with us, and maybe we should rectify ourselves to accommodate ourselves to Quebec, rather than the other way around. There is no talk in the reverse whatsoever. And if someone is permanently shut out of power, that means there probably is a fundamental difference. If there's not a regular turnout of power, California, 50% of the time is on the winning side in American elections. Texas is on the winning side in American elections roughly 50% of the time. Or even if it was 40-60 in either direction, there's a rough balance of power. But the West is out of power in the last 100 years about 80% of the time. And when it is in power, it's actually not getting very much. It's just, as I said, getting screwed a little less. What do you make towards the sore loser mentality that the West doesn't have any kind of natural right to secede, to become either independent or join the states, etc., because it's on the losing side consistently in elections?
The Eastern attitude to the West is the same attitude as the colonial power has to its colonies. This has often been remarked. This is not a deeply original thought, but it is the fact of how we are operating today in Canada. We are treated as a colony, and we instead have a strong sense of identity in Alberta. Less so perhaps in BC, which is very, very diverse these days. But in Alberta, we've got a really good history, and people are proud of that, and they're proud of what we've accomplished. And we get the sense that there's no recognition of what Alberta has done and how much Alberta is doing, and to the extent to which the whole of the country depends on the money that comes out of Alberta. We're going to great lengths to save the auto industry in Ontario, and so we should. But the auto industry is about a fifth of the size of the Alberta energy industry. And yet there, the rest of the country looks passively at what Mr. Carney is proposing to do, or what we believe he is proposing to do, because I don't know that he's necessarily being totally upfront with us on his plans for the energy industry, but we know what he said in the past and what he has done in the past. And so it's that sense of a total lack of appreciation, and we're just here as hewers of wood and
Drawers of water.
Drawers of water and of oil, up to a certain point.
All right. Well, we're going to switch it up a little, stay with the federal election here. The polls, since Mark Carney has become Liberal leader, have just had a radical reversal. It's gone from Goddard-Dameron for the Liberals to Goddard-Dameron for the NDP, and the Conservatives either far behind if you believe drunk polls like Ecos, or fairly far behind if you believe Ipsos, to more or less tied if you believe Nanos. But none of them showing the Conservatives ahead, and certainly nowhere close to where they were just, say, 3-4 months ago. So the polls are showing, the aggregate of the polls has the Liberals in the lead, and fairly in majority government territory, winning new seats that they didn't have before. But this is incongruent with the crowd sizes, Nigel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and okay, so the argument is that people are just quietly giving their decisions to the pollsters, but they don't feel any need to go out and listen to Mr. Carney. Having listened to several of his speeches, he is not the kind of man who's going to draw a lot of people in because it's exciting. He is about as interesting as a long drink of warm water. However, the reverse is true of Mr. Poilievre. He knows how to work up a crowd, and I would have accepted that argument up to the point if Poilievre was not getting huge crowds in parts of the country where Conservatives typically don't get huge crowds. And I remember back to going to Eastern Canada, for example, New Brunswick, People turned out to see the Prime Minister when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister, but they didn't come out in their thousands. I do not recall an occasion in Eastern Canada when we had 6,400 people packed into an aircraft hangar for a party event. And at the same time, when Mr. Carney famously holds a little gathering at a pub, I mean, that's a good thing to do now and then, just a change of pace, shows a different side of him. But most of his meetings, with the single exception last night here in Calgary of when he had 2,000 people, apparently, he doesn't get large crowds. So is there an enthusiasm for the Liberals? And I kind of doubt it, because if people are not enthusiastic enough to go out to a meeting, if they're not enthusiastic enough to give the way the Conservatives give, will they be enthusiastic enough to go out and vote when the day comes? And this, I think, must be very much on the minds of the Liberal Party organizers.
Cory, does this mean the polls are quite possibly wrong, or just that maybe the polls are right, but conservative voters tend to be just much more excited and enthusiastic about voting and angry at the status quo? It is hard to work up a crowd of saying, give us a fourth term, 9 more years of the last crap we've had, and doing it with a guy who's even less charismatic than Trudeau. I don't know, are the polls wrong, or is it enthusiasm?
A lot of us are hoping the polls are wrong, and conservatives are often underrepresented in polls. That's nothing new. I don't want to be negative on things, but in a sense of how it might turn into votes, but it could also show differences in organizational techniques and what the conservatives are trying to do versus what the Liberals are trying to do. They're playing their strengths. As you said, Carney's a little dull. It might not be your best thing to bring a bunch of people into a room and have them bored for an hour. Mr. Poilievre has been very effective even through the leadership in getting large groups together and having an exciting meeting and getting your ground game together to get those volunteers, to get the word out, make sure people get to these events. The event planning, if you've worked in politics, is a nightmare. They've got some really good people on it, and they're getting them out to these. And it's good. It shows energy. I mean, it shows to people watching it even on the news if they haven't gone there. Boy, something's going on here. There's some enthusiasm, and hopefully it's catching. But I don't know if we can draw that to a direct correlation to upcoming votes either.
Well, let me give you this hopeful thought. Angry people get out to vote.
Oh, yes.
People who are satisfied will vote if they feel like it. I think that a lot of the people who are giving a yes to the Liberals are people in our demographic, the baby boomer generation. They're not ideas people, and they don't have a problem. Now, the younger people, they want a place to live. They want a job. They want an education. They want to make some money. And it's not happening under 9 years of the Trudeau government. So, yes, they're mad. They have all kinds of ideas of why this is, and it is to them that Mr. Poilievre has been speaking, and he will get them out to vote.
Well, and that's another aspect of it. If you're organizational, the GOTV for, get out the vote, that's an important part of the campaigning. Mm-hmm. And if the ground game is that good with Poilievre and getting people out to the rallies, that could also be reflected on his group of organizers getting the identified supporters out to those polls when they open up. So some of that can translate that way as well. Just got to be careful with it. That's all. I would say sometimes the dull candidate still wins the race.
Well, Stephen Harper's brand, I think, was borrowed a bit from Bill Davis, former Premier of Ontario. I think, the saying was bland sells or something. Stephen Harper, with a few exceptions, was generally not a fiery speaker. He deliberately put forward very much like Mark Carney, the economist look. He was trained as an economist, didn't really practice as it, but trained it as an economist, almost putting forward like, I'm the bean counting accountant here. You can trust me to mind the shop. It might not be exciting, but it'll be competent and no big surprises. I think a big part of that was it ran counter to the perennial liberal narrative of the hidden agenda, which I always hoped that Stephen Harper had, and it turned out
we just couldn't find it when it came to it.
Yeah, I was very that was my very disappointed in it. But and it worked until the shiny pony Justin Trudeau came around, and that wore off. Perhaps, Nigel, do you think there is an appetite for boring because Justin Trudeau was not boring, he was not dull, and I think he's got a lot more mental chops than Justin Trudeau, obviously. In a way, Pierre Poilievre because he is colorful, because he is charismatic, is in a way, is he maybe working against the desire of voters, if there is a desire of voters, to have a boring bean counter prime minister?
Well, it could be that way. Like change is threatening, and Pierre Poilievre is offering change. Now, I think he's offering change that people want, especially if you're one of the homeless, jobless ones living in your parents' basement. So yeah, you would get excited about that. But I suppose if you are a comfortable person, you may not find that particular urge for change so much of a driving factor. Nevertheless, the older generation does hold the purse strings, and they could be anxious that somebody like Pierre Poilievre is going to change everything to their disadvantage. So maybe they're quiet voters.
I've said this before, that very quietly, I think Pierre Poilievre's promises, if he can make it come true or not, of building more homes and bringing housing prices down, very quietly, a lot of older voters who are sitting on a huge equity in their homes, they've got to look at that and say, that's not in my interest.
Well, they have to say that of Mr. Carney too, though. Yesterday he was promising to build millions of mouse dorms. So
well, maybe they are projecting on him the way I projected on Stephen Harper, that he has a hidden agenda. That he doesn't really mean it. Yeah, there'll be some building, but it won't be so much building that it's going to endanger the value of my home. Where we have a real generational divide here, and normally it's older voters who vote conservative, younger voters voting for progressivist parties. We're in a flip here.
I guess it depends, Derek, on whether your children are living in your basement. If they are,
well, then you buy a lot.
Yeah, sure, you're motivated.
they would launch here.
So the grandparents who don't have to deal with that, they want to hold on to the limited housing market. The parents with their 28-year-old kids living in the basement, they might be a bit more sympathetic to getting them the hell out.
I think so.
Okay. Well, let's talk about, before your eyes all glaze over, the Notwithstanding clause, the part of the Constitution that allows Parliament or provincial legislatures to essentially throw out or preempt court rulings that say something is unconstitutional under the Charter. And some people don't understand it. It only applies to the Charter part of the Constitution, nothing else. Pierre Poilievre said that this is three strikes and you're out rule today, and it seems highly possible, if not probable, that the Supreme Court would say that's not constitutional, that's cruel and unusual punishment, and so that the Notwithstanding clause would need to be invoked to for that kind of law to be come to force. The leader of the Bloc Québécois says, well, that's just lunacy. You can't be treating the poor criminals this way. We have to respect the Charter. Oh, and then in the very next sentence, he says, and I would invoke the Notwithstanding clause to get the federal government's official bilingualism requirements out of Quebec, so Quebec can be fully unilingual. Cory, there's part of me that likes that. Why don't we get the federal government out of official bilingualism in all provinces? And, we could make the official language of Alberta English, Punjab, or Swahili if we like.
Well, I mean, if you're going to do it, if we were going to be bilingual and we did just by demographics, I'm not sure if Cantonese or these days now it might be Punjabi is the second language. Then let's address that. I mean, when's the last time you've run across a unilingual French person in Alberta anyways? They're pretty hard to find unless you go to a federal office, and I dodge those for all I'm worth.
Yeah, like the only time I ran into a French accent in Quebec, other than one of my buddies down the street, is when I have to pay at the ticket booth going into Banff.
Well, and that's a French accent, but they still speak English perfectly fine because, so it is ridiculous that they put it here. I think it would be a great precedent to set, as you said. I mean, seeing Premier Smith say, we're just wasting too much time. I want to see Punjabi on the back of the cereal box when I read it in the morning, along with my English ingredients.
Or we could just end French and have just English.
Or just have English altogether.
Is this something we should take the Bloc up on? That we use the Notwithstanding clause, not just for Quebec official bilingualism, for the whole country, perhaps.
Well, again, as an independence-minded guy, I'd like to see that Constitution and Charter challenged quite often. And hey, it was old Pierre who put that notwithstanding clause in the Charter in the first place. So we're only using the rules that Trudeau's dad gave us. And
Well, under some pressure from Alberta's own Peter Lucky,
Yeah.
let us remember. I mean, that notwithstanding clause is actually the provincial protection against the overweening power of a majority in the rest of the country. We need that.
and there's an opportunity, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, whether Polyev is going to be willing to use it federally, it gets a little more dicey with those things. Does he want to go to war with the judiciary? I think it needs to be. We've seen some pretty horrific cases of sentencing of some very violent people being released. But it opens a big discussion. I'm not huge on mandatory minimums, to be honest, because I think the nuance of individual circumstances in a crime should be taken into account by a competent judge when they decide these things. But when we see so many failures of them to judge on those, I don't know if mandatory minimums are the best way to deal with that, though, or trying for judicial reform. But I was ready to shake stuff up. But if that translates into provincial use of it, I'm all game for it.
Well, let's talk about it for crime. But the Polyev's 3 strikes and you're out proposal just on its own merits, Nigel.
Honestly,
I'm a little extra peed about this right now. Just yesterday when I left the newsroom to go home, I got on my motorcycle. But as I was walking up to it, the parkade, it was robbed. The saddlebags on it were just emptied out. Some meth heads stole some gloves, glasses, and a bag of Werther's Originals. This episode of The Pipeline's brought to you by Werther's Originals. So good, the meth heads love it too. I was actually not as... I was actually almost relieved, because the last time a meth head got on my bike, he pushed it over and caused thousands of dollars of damage. But, crime is just wildly out of control. The police do nothing about it. I don't think this is all just the courts. The police do nothing about it. Like when a meth head knocked my bike over, a year and a half ago, I looked at the security footage. I found the guy. I rode around downtown, gave him right to the police. They charge him, arrest him, release him. He just never shows up to court. And because he's a homeless drug addict, the police spend no effort to try and find the guy. I guarantee he's probably within 500 meters of where we're sitting right now. The police do nothing, which is why I didn't even call the cops when my bike was robbed yesterday. They do nothing. Something has to be done about this. 3 strikes and you're out seems okay. Maybe it'll help. But I think policing is where the issue is.
well, it is. But look, I mean, the reason it's 3 strikes and you're out is because it's a baseball term. Everybody understands it. It's an easy sell. So what do they say? They say once is a happening, twice is a coincidence, and 3 is a pattern. So, all right, somebody knocks over your bike. Once is a happening. Say they do it again, somebody else. Is that a coincidence? If it's the same guy, no. Already the pattern is establishing itself 3 times. What are you going to do with this guy?
Well, we already had the 3rd and 4th. I remember last summer we had meth heads jumping out, trying to get hit by my motorcycle in insurance scams. So I've already had 4.
All right. So look, what do you do with people who make crime a habit? I get the argument that you're making, Cory, that there is nuance and subtlety in some situations, and maybe the judge shouldn't be bound.
Oh, and I was speaking about mandatory minimums. Well, they're tied together, but a 3 strikes thing, I mean...
if the guy is back for the 3rd time for the same kind of offense, obviously, if it's serious, it's time to take him off the street. It does work. I remember back in, it must be 20 years ago now, but in Manitoba, they had a horrible problem with car thefts. So one day they went out and picked everybody up who had a habit of stealing cars, and they incarcerated them. And for the duration of the incarceration, they had virtually no car thefts. Now, car thefts is an insurance job. It's tiresome. You don't want it to happen. But for serious things like rape, grand robbery, murder, how many chances are you going to give a guy to get over it? So I actually am largely in favor of 3 strikes and you're out.
Oh, and
that's your exact question.
And so am I, if it's done right. There's part of the issue. I think California was where they screwed it up in the 90s, I believe it was. But they kind of put in a 3 strikes law that was broad. And they were getting suddenly people who had a marijuana possession ticket on their 3rd strike getting 15-year sentences, which was they messed up the law, which had the right intention, but you got to get a little more careful with it.
Sure you did.
I mean, an armed robber 3 times? I'm worried because he's going to kill somebody.
By the way, I think in the Harper ministry, we did have it right.
Mhm.
But the idea that government should actually make the rules rather than the judiciary offended the judiciary. And so one of the first things that Mr. Trudeau did when he took over was to get rid of that. That's
Oh,
the
yeah,
liberal
and
judiciary.
just because it's tough to do the laws doesn't mean I don't feel it should be done. I mean, I'm just saying there's going to be challenges, and I hope Polly follows through on those. Again, we just got to make sure we're at least prioritizing too. We only have so much jail space because that's what happened in California. You've got the pothead who's taking up a cell, and then the murderer gets loose because you got
The
more-
pothead wasn't hurting anybody. These people are. I've got a much more radical idea, and it is fraught with problems. I think we have almost a blanket notwithstanding clause for essentially dealing with homeless drug addicts for a year, and essentially just a roundup, a brutal roundup. It would require building almost prison camps to take the numbers. But like, you walk around Calgary. Calgary is traditionally one of the safest, cleanest cities in the country. Even we're overrun. You could just imagine how downtown Eastside Vancouver is, which is just apocalyptic. I think we use the notwithstanding clause, essentially suspend their charter rights for a year, and we just round them up, put them through forcible.
on a shorter term, though. That's the
I mean, it's draconian. It's
compassionate intervention policy that Premier Smith has been proposing.
I'm talking a much broader.
I know
like,
you're
people-
talking broad.
Like I'm talking pretty old school, brutal, because I think the problem is at that level. It's crazy.
But we're digressing, but onto something very good, I think, because that's where we got a lot of the crime, both dangerous and property. It comes down to that addiction epidemic we've got and the mental health crisis we've got. And if we took the people, it's still, I mean, maybe not looked at it as so much as a punitive roundup, but still as these are people who are so out of control, we can't allow them agency any longer. The same as with the Mental Health Act. We already have clauses for it. If a person looks like they're going to harm themselves or others, we can hold them and hopefully treat them and make it so that would stop happening. That should be applied to these people. I mean, on the street level, when they're at that degree, and we've seen it, as you said, anybody who's been downtown, you see the zombies. They're not going to pull themselves out of that hole. They're covered in sores. They're skinny. They're not in their right mind. And let's quit pretending they aren't dangerous. So we see the stabbings on the train platforms. I'm with you. Just think we could package it a little better to sell it.
I remember being not too much about the brutality.
No, it'd be the
I know you're
it'd be
about
the brutal on crime act. Forget tough on crime. The brutal on crime.
Yeah.
And people's rights would be wrongfully violated. That would be an inevitable consequence. That there would be some wrong people caught up in the net of something like this. But I think we are at such a crisis level of crime. Like I didn't report it. I didn't report that someone robbed my bike. Because what's the bloody point? I'll just spend a couple hours talking to cops so they can scribble it down.
And that's
then
bad
do
for
absolutely nothing.
It's bad for our statistics too, because it means there are a lot more. You're not alone. There's a lot more crimes happening. The people when they get to their car and the window's smashed out and somebody's taking. Why am I going to bother? I might as well just get it fixed. There's more happening than the statistics indicate, and that frustrates me. I mean, if we're going to keep down the rabbit hole, but around these safe injection sites, the crime in those areas are horrific. But who's going to call because somebody stole something off your lawn or tried to break into your back
You
door?
know where your cattle.
They call the police on the guy who tries to stop you from stealing from.
Yes.
Sorry, Nigel.
Do you know where your catalytic converter is?
Yeah.
Apparently, they take about 30 seconds to tape whip off if you know what you're doing. Nothing but a revenue stream for the crooked class.
Wow. And that shows some of the madness of progressives. I watched a debate among, actually, just a side note again, right? Because in Calgary, we got that's where justice comes into municipal politics too. And there was a municipal politician down in the States, and there was a great clip of her standing up, chiding Toyota because they were apparently one of the more targeted catalytic converter vehicles for thefts, saying it was their fault because they made it so easy to get at that these guys could steal it like it is. It's under a car. You need a tool. You need to cut that thing. We're not talking about a laptop left on a coffee table that when somebody went to the bathroom, that somebody snatched as a crime of opportunity. These are planned, but the progressive mindset blames the victim. As you said, they're going to go after the person who...
the gun is responsible, not the person.
Yeah, it's absurd. And we've got to, if we want justice reform, It's a huge issue, and I love seeing discussion of it because it's bugged me for a long time. But it's also a big issue, you know. So speaking of the old onion with a lot of layers, to begin with, though, just getting our most violent as Polyev wants to do, and using the Notwithstanding to do it, and getting those dangerous ones and those sex offenders locked up. Yeah, I'm all for it.
I think it's start. I just don't think it's not gonna get it because it's not just bad judges, it's police who are overwhelmed. Like the guy, you know, I handed the guy, they charged him. I said, what's gonna happen next? They said nothing. He's not gonna show up. There's nothing we can do. We're gonna need to build bigger temporary prisons and deal with this stuff because it's killing our communities.
Well, it's something else. Mental health facilities. We need nut houses again, and they don't
Bring
have.
back make nut houses great again.
Absolutely. I mean, they don't have to look like they did in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but we need secured facilities, and we've been closing those down for decades. And where do the people that used to reside in them go?
They're right outside.
They're out on the streets, and they're desperate, and they're in trouble.
Mhm.
Indeed. Okay. Well, let's turn it to our parting shots. We didn't discuss this in advance, so hopefully you guys don't preempt what I had. We'll start with you, Nigel.
Well, hopefully we don't. Look, we had a story this morning about how Carney supporters steal and vandalize hundreds of Conservative campaign signs in Ottawa. And I couldn't help thinking how very appropriate that was for Carney's supporters to steal the signs after Carney himself has stolen so many of Polyera's policies.
Oh, this is true. That's nice. And nice what you did there. That's good.
Okay. Well, just a side note.
Not ripping on that any longer. Okay. That was a real parting shot. That point. Okay.
Oh, bang.
Okay.
Yeah. There's been some interesting vandalism. I saw a whole bunch of Shuv Majumder signs. I've got Free Palestine spray painted all over them in South Calgary for whatever reason. But the Liberal ones, untouched. Shuv's been pretty outspoken for Israel for quite a while, though it does get frustrating. I mean, we all know Shuv is a good guy. That's just the usual sign BS. For my thing, it ties in a little with polling and wondering and some of those national trends. This one floored me, and it's Ipsos. As you said, they tend to be more liberal friendly. This isn't about it is about the parties, but they found apparently with a large poll that Canadians feel that Liberals are the best to manage the energy and resources across Canada.
We were just talking about mental health issues being widespread in society.
This party that was led by a man who said there was no business case to export liquid natural gas. We could already be exporting it if that ding-dong hadn't been shutting it down back then. This party that shut down the Trans Mountain Pipeline, that shut down Energy East. And Canadians still think that they are the best party to manage our resources. Gets back to why I think the West is saying, we can't reason with you guys anymore. You're beyond reason. This is absurd. And we're talking a widespread 38-25 sort of thing going on. Now it's Ipsos. Who knows? But they're not as bad as Frankie.
Oh.
Really, people, I mean, you could love the Liberals for many, many things, whatever they might be. But to say that they would be the best at managing our resources and energy is getting into madness.
Well, you know, if the East truly does feel that way, then we might already be effectively different countries. We're not talking the same language here.
Pretty much. I was just floored when I saw that one.
All right. Well, geez, we're all flowing real nice here. I want to talk. Just note, Mark Carney in Calgary today, saying he's going to make Canada an energy superpower.
I've heard that before.
Yeah. Who?
Stephen Harper.
Yeah. What happened in the meantime? Yeah, 9 years of Liberals. But I just want to remark on the language of it. You could tell he almost said, we want to make Canadian energy great again. You could, like, I thought that actually would have been a fine alternative headline. Although energy superpower, you could put in actual quotes. Make Canadian energy great again. You couldn't put it in it. He had some interesting, he was talking about approvals process and not duplicating with the provinces and whatnot. I'm going to have to wait and see, more in-depth analysis by experts of what it means. We've got Sean Polster in the newsroom. You could see him over Cory's shoulder there. Sean working away on that very thing, I think. Maybe it cuts down on red tape for project approvals. If so, I mean, credit where it's due. But it also could mean that if a province has denied an application, Quebec, that means that, does that mean that the federal government, by default, also denies an application to build a pipeline or something like that, or a cobalt mine, etc. Hard to say. It's an interesting policy. We're going to need better analysis from experts. I know more about it than I do. But I just remarking on the language, you could tell he almost wanted to say we're going to make Canadian energy great again. For obvious reasons, he did not use that phraseology. Okay, that's it for today's show. Remember, because of the extremely generous donations that came from all of you, we have dropped the paywall and made the Western Standard free for the entirety of this election campaign. There's no more paywall. You can go, you can read until your heart's content. If you're not yet already a member or subscribed to our newsletter, all you'll have to do is just put in your email address when you go to the Western Standard and you'll get on the newsletter, and then you've just got total free access all the way until, April 28th, 29th, and yeah, we'll probably keep it all the way until the end of the month. But yeah, share it with your friends and family. All you have to do is sign up for the newsletter, and you can read the Western Standard for free for the entirety of the month. Thank you very much for joining us today, and God bless.
What does success mean to you? Peace of mind? Financial freedom? Generational wealth? What do you see in your future? Investing in gold and silver can help you get there. Through our trading partners, New World Precious Metals offers safe, affordable, secure international accounts to help you meet your unique financial goals. Connect with one of our experienced team members. Invest in gold and silver today.